Right now, pinch the skin on the back of your hand. Lift it. Hold it for 2 full seconds. Then let go. Watch it. How quickly does it snap back? If you're in your 20s, it springs back in under half a second, almost instantly, like a rubber band that's never been stretched. If you're in your 40s, it takes a little longer. If you're in your 60s, it may take 2, 3, even 4 full seconds. That single test, a test doctors have used for over a century, is called skin turgor assessment. And what you just measured isn't just hydration. It isn't just skin elasticity. What you just felt was the speed at which your connective tissue has aged. But here's what almost nobody realizes. That slow snapback isn't a surface problem. It's a signal. A signal coming from deep inside a cascade of biological processes that began, quietly, invisibly, without your permission, sometime around your 40th birthday. And those processes don't just affect your skin. They affect your brain, your immune system, your cellular machinery, your memory, the speed at which you think, the efficiency of your heart, the length of the very chromosomes inside every cell in your body. The real question isn't why does skin lose its elasticity? The real question is, what else is losing it, and why does it happen so fast after 40? Here's a number that should stop you cold. After the age of 40, the human body doesn't age in a straight line. It accelerates. A landmark 2024 study from Stanford University tracked thousands of proteins and metabolites in the human body over time and found something that contradicts everything we assumed about gradual aging. There are 2 dramatic surges in biological aging. One around age 44, and another, even more aggressive, around age 60. Not a slow, steady decline, surges. The researchers described it as non-linear aging, meaning the body essentially shifts gears, twice. But that's not the strange part. The strange part is what's driving those surges. Because it isn't simply time passing. It isn't just the accumulation of wear and tear. It's a molecular process that your body actually uses, that your cells were designed to rely on, that slowly turns against you. To understand it, you need to go somewhere most people never think about. You need to go to the very end of your chromosomes. Inside the nucleus of nearly every cell in your body, you have 46 chromosomes, long, twisted strands of DNA that carry every instruction your body has ever needed to build itself, repair itself, and replicate itself. But here's what most people don't know. At the end of each chromosome, there is a cap, a protective sequence of repeating DNA called a telomere. Think of it like the plastic tip at the end of a shoelace. Its entire purpose is to protect the chromosome from fraying, from being mistakenly fused with neighboring DNA, from degrading. And every single time a cell divides, every time your body heals a wound, regenerates skin, replaces a dying liver cell, those telomeres get a little shorter. This was discovered by biologist Elizabeth Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2009 for proving that telomere length is a biological clock, one ticking at the cellular level inside every organ of your body simultaneously. At birth, your telomeres are long, abundantly long. By your 20s and 30s, they've shortened, but still have ample protective length. By your 40s, something shifts. The rate of shortening accelerates. Cells that can no longer divide properly enter a state called cellular senescence, a kind of suspended animation where the cell neither divides nor dies. And here's where it gets interesting. Senescent cells don't just sit quietly. They become biologically toxic. They begin secreting a cocktail of inflammatory molecules, proteins, cytokines, enzymes, that signal to neighboring cells. Scientists call this the senescence-associated secretory phenotype, or SASP. And SASP does something remarkable and destructive. It spreads. One senescent cell inflames its neighbors. Those neighbors become senescent, and the cascade expands outward like a slow biological fire, moving through your tissues, your organs, your immune system. This is why inflammation markers in the blood rise so dramatically after 40. This is why recovery takes longer. This is why wounds that healed in days now take weeks. But the body isn't finished yet. Because senescent cells are accumulating somewhere else, somewhere that changes the entire story of aging. They're accumulating in your brain. Close your eyes for a moment and try to remember what you had for dinner exactly 1 week ago today. Not last night, not 2 days ago, 7 days ago. Most people over 40 find this harder than it used to be. They might remember the general category, chicken, pasta, something quick, but the specific details, the textures, the exact sequence of the meal are gone. Scientists used to call this benign forgetfulness, a harmless side effect of a busy life. They were wrong. What's actually happening isn't benign at all. It's a precise, measurable structural change in the architecture of your hippocampus, the seahorse-shaped brain structure responsible for converting short-term experiences into long-term memories. And the mechanism behind it is something your body absolutely needs to survive. But after 40, it begins operating in a way that accelerates neural decline at a speed most people never realize is happening. The mechanism is called neuroinflammation, and it starts with a cell type that almost no one outside of neuroscience has ever heard of. Deep inside your brain, woven through every region, from the prefrontal cortex that handles decision-making to the cerebellum that coordinates movement to the hippocampus that stores memory, there are cells that are not neurons. They are called microglia. This organ is not what most people think it is. Most people believe the brain is primarily a network of neurons, firing, connecting, learning. But neurons make up only about 10% of the brain's total cell count. The vast majority are glial cells. And microglia are the brain's dedicated immune system. When your brain encounters damage, a blow to the head, a toxin, an infection, microglia activate. They swell. They migrate toward the threat. They engulf debris, clear dead cells, and release inflammatory signals to recruit more immune resources. In the short term, they are extraordinary, essential, life-saving. But scientists originally believed microglia simply returned to their resting state after each immune response. What researchers discovered in the last decade changes that understanding completely. After 40, microglia begin to dysregulate. With each activation, each small injury, each infection, each metabolic insult, they become slightly more reactive than before, less precise, less able to return to equilibrium. They begin existing in a state of chronic, low-grade activation, releasing inflammatory molecules continuously, even in the absence of a real threat. The brain, in effect, begins running a low-level inflammation program that never fully shuts off. And this changes everything about how neurons function. Inflamed neural tissue has a higher threshold for synaptic firing, meaning neurons need a stronger stimulus to connect. Memory consolidation slows. Processing speed drops. The speed of thought, not intelligence, not knowledge, but the raw velocity of neural transmission, begins to decrease measurably. Research published in the journal Nature Neuroscience found that brain processing speed peaks around age 24 and declines gradually until around 40, at which point the decline steepens significantly, particularly in tasks requiring divided attention, rapid recall, and executive planning. What most people miss is that this isn't about neurons dying en masse. The neurons are mostly still there. It's about the efficiency of their communication, degraded by chronic microglial inflammation, driven by accumulated senescent cells, compounded by the loss of a molecule so critical that its decline alone could explain half of the aging process after 40. That molecule is called NAD+. And what it does inside your mitochondria will reframe everything you thought you understood about energy, aging, and cellular survival. Here's an experiment you've already been running without knowing it. Think about the last time you felt genuinely, deeply rested. The kind of sleep where you woke up and felt ready, alert, present, physically light. Now think about the last time you felt that way in the last year. For most people over 40, it's harder to locate that feeling. Not because sleep architecture changes dramatically overnight, but because something inside the cell's energy factory is gradually losing its ability to restore itself. The story begins inside a structure so small, so ancient, so fundamental that it predates the human body by over 1 billion years. The mitochondria. And the molecule that keeps it running is disappearing. Every cell in your body is powered by mitochondria, organelles that convert the food you eat and the oxygen you breathe into a molecule of chemical energy called ATP. Every heartbeat, every thought, every movement, every repair process requires ATP. And ATP cannot be produced without a molecule called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD+. NAD+ is not a vitamin. It's not a supplement trend. It is a fundamental coenzyme, a molecular worker present in every single cell that participates in over 500 enzymatic reactions in the human body. It does 3 things that matter enormously after 40. First, it fuels the mitochondrial electron transport chain, the precise biological sequence that generates ATP. Without adequate NAD+, cells produce less energy. Less energy means slower repair, slower cognition, slower immune response. Second, NAD+ activates a family of proteins called sirtuins, proteins that regulate DNA repair, inflammation control, gene expression, and stress response. Think of sirtuins as the body's master repair crew. NAD+ is their fuel. Without it, the crew stops working. Third, and this is the part that connects everything, NAD+ is consumed by another enzyme called PARP, which repairs damaged DNA. Every time your DNA breaks, from sunlight, from metabolic stress, from the sheer mechanical stress of being alive, PARP activates and uses NAD+ to patch the break. The problem is that after 40, DNA damage accumulates faster than before. Senescent cells increase, inflammatory burden rises, and every repair attempt consumes more NAD+. The demand for NAD+ explodes, precisely as its production declines. Research from Harvard Medical School found that NAD+ levels in human muscle tissue drop by approximately 50% between the ages of 40 and 60. In brain tissue, the decline is comparable. The result is a cellular energy crisis operating in slow motion across every organ simultaneously. Mitochondria become less efficient. Fewer mitochondria are produced. The ones that remain are older, more damaged, producing more reactive oxygen species, molecular byproducts that damage the very DNA they're supposed to power. And this creates a feedback loop. More DNA damage, more PARP activation, more NAD+ consumed. Less energy for repair, more damage accumulates. Less NAD+ remains. Scientists call it the NAD+ depletion spiral. And the next mechanism it unlocks is even more surprising, because it doesn't happen inside cells. It happens in the spaces between them. You are not just made of cells. Between every cell in your body, filling the gaps, providing structural support, transmitting molecular signals, and directing tissue behavior, there is a vast, dynamic network called the extracellular matrix. It is made of collagen, elastin, fibronectin, proteoglycans. It gives skin its snapback. It gives arteries their elasticity. It gives cartilage its shock-absorbing capacity. It gives the brain its structural scaffolding. After 40, three things happen to the extracellular matrix that accelerate aging across every tissue simultaneously. First, collagen production declines. Collagen is the most abundant protein in the human body, the structural backbone of skin, bone, tendon, and blood vessel walls. After 30, production declines by approximately 1% per year. By 40, that 10-year accumulation is measurable. By 50, it's visible in every reflective surface. But the deeper consequence isn't cosmetic, it's mechanical. Arteries stiffen, joint cartilage thins, vertebral discs lose water content and height. The physical structure of your body is slowly becoming less resilient. Second, cross-linking increases. A process called glycation, driven by blood sugar fluctuations, causes sugar molecules to bind to collagen fibers, forming irreversible bridges called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These cross-links make tissues rigid, less elastic, and more prone to structural failure. They accumulate in the lens of the eye, contributing to the near vision decline almost everyone experiences after 40. In blood vessels, they stiffen arterial walls and raise baseline blood pressure. In the kidneys, they impair filtration capacity. Third, and here's where the story becomes genuinely strange, AGEs are recognized by the immune system as foreign bodies. They trigger immune activation, which drives more inflammation, which accelerates more cell senescence, which depletes more NAD+, which reduces mitochondrial function, which impairs the cellular machinery responsible for producing new collagen. Every mechanism connects to every other mechanism, but there is one more system failing simultaneously, and it may be the most significant of all: the endocrine system. After 40, the hormonal landscape of the human body undergoes a seismic reorganization. Testosterone declines in men by approximately 1 to 2% per year after 30, but accelerates sharply after 40, affecting muscle mass, bone density, cognitive sharpness, and cardiovascular health. In women, the perimenopause transition, which research now shows often begins in the early 40s, not just the late 40s, drives dramatic fluctuations in estrogen and progesterone that affect sleep architecture, thermoregulation, mood, bone density, and the very microbiome of the gut. Growth hormone, which governs cellular repair and tissue regeneration, declines by approximately 14% per decade after 30. DHEA, a master precursor hormone produced by the adrenal glands, falls by roughly 2% per year after its peak in the mid-20s. The body's repair and rebuild cycle is losing the hormonal fuel it requires to run. And at the center of this collapse, receiving cascading signals from senescent cells, inflammatory cytokines, depleted NAD+, glycated collagen, and fluctuating hormones simultaneously, sits an organ that may be the true pacemaker of human aging. Not the heart, not the brain, the immune system itself. Scientists have named what happens to the aging immune system immunosenescence, a state in which the immune system becomes simultaneously overactivated and underperforming, chronically inflamed and yet less capable of mounting a targeted response to actual threats. This is why older adults are more vulnerable to infection, more prone to autoimmune conditions, less responsive to vaccines, and more susceptible to cancer, as the immune surveillance that clears precancerous cells becomes slower and less precise. And here is the paradox that researchers are only beginning to fully map. The same inflammatory signals driving immunosenescence, the SASP molecules from senescent cells, the microglial activation products in the brain, the AGE-triggered immune responses in tissues. These signals cross the blood-brain barrier. They reach the hypothalamus, the brain's master regulator of hormones, temperature, hunger, circadian rhythm, and stress response. And the hypothalamus, under chronic inflammatory bombardment, begins to age faster than the rest of the brain. A 2013 study published in Nature by researcher Dongsheng Kai demonstrated that hypothalamic inflammation in mice directly accelerated systemic aging, and that blocking that inflammation extended lifespan. The hypothalamus, it turns out, doesn't just respond to aging. It drives it. Every signal you have ever felt that something has shifted, a slower recovery, a foggier morning, an ache that wasn't there before, a body that no longer bounces back the way it did. Every one of those signals has been trying to tell you something about this cascade. Now, step back, because what we've just traced is not a collection of separate problems. It is one unified biological event. Go back to the skin on the back of your hand, that slow snapback you measured at the beginning of this video. Now you know what it was. It was the elastin matrix, stiffened by cross-linked collagen and glycation-induced AGEs. It was the fibroblast cells that produce new collagen, slowing down their mitochondria NAD+ depleted, their DNA accumulating lesions that PARP doesn't have enough fuel to fully repair. It was the inflammatory environment created by senescent cells cycling through the tissue like a slow chemical tide. That one physical observation, that tiny delay in a piece of skin returning to its resting position, is a readout of your telomere length, your NAD+ levels, your mitochondrial density, your microglial activation state, your hypothalamic inflammatory burden, your circulating AGE concentration, and the accumulated output of every repair system in your body running slightly behind schedule. This is what aging looks like from the inside. Not a gradual fading, not entropy for its own sake, but a cascade, interconnected, self-reinforcing, accelerating, that crosses from cell to tissue, from tissue to organ, from organ to system, from system to the brain that governs all of them. The scientists studying longevity today at the Salk Institute, at Harvard's Aging Division, at the Buck Institute for Research on Aging, are not chasing the fountain of youth. They are mapping this cascade with extraordinary precision. Because if you can interrupt it at the right point, if you can clear senescent cells, restore NAD+ levels, reduce chronic inflammation, protect telomere integrity, keep the hypothalamus quiet, the cascade slows. Rapamycin, a drug originally developed as an immunosuppressant, has extended lifespan in every organism tested, and works in part by silencing the same inflammatory pathways that drive hypothalamic aging. Senolytics, drugs and compounds that selectively clear senescent cells from tissue, are currently in human clinical trials for conditions from osteoarthritis to pulmonary fibrosis to Alzheimer's disease. NAD plus precursors like NMN and NR are being tested in human trials for their capacity to restore mitochondrial function in aging muscle and brain tissue. Exercise, particularly resistance training combined with cardiovascular intensity, remains the most potent known biological intervention for extending telomere length, increasing NAD+ production, reducing microglial reactivity, and stimulating growth hormone release. Not metaphorically, molecularly. Sleep, particularly deep, slow-wave sleep, which declines dramatically after 40, is the period during which the brain's glymphatic system flushes inflammatory debris from neural tissue. It is not rest. It is an active biological maintenance cycle that your brain cannot perform while awake. And caloric restriction. Not starvation, but the strategic avoidance of chronic caloric excess, reduces the rate of glycation, lowers the AGE burden on connective tissue, and activates the sirtuin pathways that NAD+ supports. None of this is speculation. All of it is published, peer-reviewed, replicated biology. Here is what we know with certainty. You have a cellular clock ticking at the end of every chromosome. You have a brain that runs an immune surveillance system that becomes chronically activated with age. You have mitochondria that are slowly losing the molecular fuel they need to power repair. You have a structural matrix becoming rigid and cross-linked. You have a hormonal system reorganizing itself around a new, lower-energy equilibrium. And you have a hypothalamus sitting at the center of your endocrine and nervous systems, receiving all of these signals simultaneously, trying to regulate a body that is no longer operating with the efficiency it had at 35. That is what happens after 40. Not slowly, not gently, in cascades, in surges, in self-reinforcing loops that compound with each passing year, accelerating precisely when most people first begin to notice that something has quietly, fundamentally changed. The extraordinary thing isn't that the body ages. The extraordinary thing is that inside you, right now, there are molecular systems so precisely engineered, so intricately connected, that a single protein in a hypothalamic neuron can regulate the aging rate of your heart, your skin, your immune system, and your memories simultaneously. You began this video pinching the skin on the back of your hand. What you were measuring, without knowing it, was time. Not the time on a clock, time running inside every cell, every chromosome, every mitochondrion in your body. And now you know exactly what it's counting down.